What's that about?
That's in case you get no questions from anyone else. Simple as that.
Seems like a good question
It's
too.
the fallback question because it will fill time.
Yeah. We'll fill a lot of time on that one.
That's simple. That's what it's for. Emergency question. Hence,
You don't need it right away. That's the thing.
no, use it when you need it.
And Alex, do you want me to do questions today? Because I'll start moving some over into the queue.
So I think Kev needs a second hour. The BBC, the care and feeding of BBC would be very interesting.
Well, that's only part of the story, but yes.
Alex, what has to happen for me to be able to switch?
I've already made you host.
Okay, I didn't see that happen, but I will catch up.
So now everyone is seeing what you're seeing. So, and we'll talk about it. We've got a couple questions related to that. Actually, why don't we, Bill, why don't we move over Larry's question?
Okay, Larry Jacobson's.
Yeah, Larry Jacobson and Tim are kind of connected, but we'll use that as a way to talk to Stuart. Explain what's going on there. So, all right, stand by.
Hubbing and bubbing, just chitting and chatting.
Well, we've already done that. While you guys were talking. I just went ahead and started it. All right. Hey, everybody, welcome to Office Hours. It's good to see all of you. And if you are in YouTube, you can click on the button and join Zoom if you want. That's where we're all talking. If you are in Zoom and it's as an attendee and you're wondering how all these people became panelists, well, they got here early. They had good internet, good video, good audio, and they show up by 6:40. So if you're here by 6:40, just raise your digital Zoom hand and you can join the panel. We'd love to have you. We constantly have a rotating, a slightly changing group every day, slightly moving around. So we'd love to have you join us. We open the doors at 6 and we just talk about whatever we're talking about. We were talking about tractors this morning. So, and Top Gun, and then somehow those got connected. So it's kind of a free form discussion for the first 40 minutes. And then we go into mic checks. Mic checks is where we make sure everyone looks good and sounds good. And then we start the hour. So the next week and a half, I'm just letting you all know, will be pretty sparse as far as the second hours go. We do have a great one tomorrow. So we're and Schy, do you want to tell us a little bit about our guest tomorrow? I threw Schy.
Yes,
Schy was
yes, I do. I was watching the YouTube channel, which is in delay. So Graham Kerr is the original celebrity food chef. He was right up there with Julia Child. At one point, he had over 200 million viewers when there was only 3 TV channels, because he was being filmed in Canada and was communicated to the English-speaking world in the early 70s. So he is also bringing on his producer of his new show, her name is Faith Schmidt, and they have spent the last 24 weeks pondering one topic a week, from an 86-year-old point of view to a 26-year-old female point of view. So it's going to be a good conversation tomorrow.
I think you'll have a lot of things to share with us. So Graham's going to be here tomorrow, but most of the second hours will be pretty basic. I'm in a production that's pretty intense right now, so we'll but once I get out of the other end of it, do expect things to kind of pick up in November. So anyway, but we're going to have kind of more general ones, things that don't require too much prep between now and the end of the month, except for Graham. So we're very excited to have him here tomorrow. So the thing to note today, we'll run for 2 hours, or if we run out of questions, but we're kind of leaning more towards video today. So, but ask questions as they come in, and we'll answer them. So anyway, second hour is generally more focused on video today. We're going to talk about getting a job as we're talking about being a producer this week. So last week we talked about, like, if you're an individual trying to get work, how do you do that? This Friday we're going to talk about, if you're a producer, how do you do that well? So that's, and when we define producer, we're saying you're the interface between the client and the team. That's what we're defining as a producer. Anyway, so that's what we're gonna be talking about then. And then Saturday, of course, we're doing education. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and if you want to share what we're doing with other people, if you think this is a useful thing, I'll put the link in Makana. Use this link. Don't use your own link. Otherwise, people will come in as you. Anyway, let's get started. Bill, I think we've got a couple questions.
We do, and I think you were saying we should kind of go through the two that are in the top and meld them together into a big discussion. We start with Tim Corbin from Baltimore, who says, cutting a show in Zoom. I haven't yet found a way to keep my view, the host, on gallery so I can just switch between spotlight. Is this not a feature? If not, is this the best way to spotlight? Is the best way to spotlight, then switch to gallery, then change spotlight and switch to gallery and so forth? And then Larry Jacobson from Cheyenne is saying, he played Mickey and Guy for a weekly small group we attend, which is virtual right now. It went very well, but when I shared the ability for the leader to share his screen, we were both sharing screens.
Oh, this is two different questions. Sorry, I saw it as one question, but we'll get into that second question.
Okay, so we'll do the first one.
Yeah. So the big thing is that most of the people, Mickey, I think, and Mickey's not here today, but in general, I believe Mickey has 2 computers and 3 screens is how he's doing it. And really it's, so basically one computer is set up with 2 screens. And so he has his view on one screen, and then he has gallery on the other, I believe is how he has it set up. And then on that third computer is a participant. And that can be that should be able to be an iPhone or iPad or anything else, but it lets him have confidence in what's actually going out. So that's the challenge is that you want, and I always, when I'm running an event inside of Zoom, I always have some computer on there as a participant that is just a participant, because I always want to see in a webinar, I want to see what everybody else is seeing to make sure that I'm cutting what I expect and what I think is actually happening. Unfortunately, Zoom, doesn't really have this piece of the puzzle worked out very well. So we don't usually, I think the easiest way to approach it is that you're really switching between gallery view and speaker view as the host. And then you are, in general, you have gallery view and speaker view. And then you're spotlighting when someone like Guy or Jeffrey posts an image up. When they use their switcher and post an image up, then they spotlight it, and then that'll pop it in. And we all know when you spotlight, if you spotlight everybody all the time, for the folks that are the panelists, it's very confusing because our screen is constantly jumping and we don't see the whole gallery. So it changes our state all the time, which is not a great experience for us. So anyway, so the key is to switch back and forth between gallery and speaker, then spotlight on the things that are on a screen. And that's about as complicated as it needs to be. I look back on some of the older ones, some of the very first ones, the records, and I realized we almost never saw gallery at all. Like I had it on speaker the whole time when I was running it myself, before someone was editing, it was just on speaker the whole time. So it's an interesting experience to look back on that. So anyway, that's how we do it. Obviously, I think that this is a pretty sore subject for, an area that Zoom really needs to attend to is like how the edit actually works to really take it to the next level as far as a broadcast solution. I think that's the challenge. So anyway, that's basically the edit. Does anyone have anything to add? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I think it also is important for a classroom too, to have spotlights on, bring certain students up to the front, like if they're reading a report or something like that. So I think that it's something that doesn't need to happen. And I know that they have the classroom, which has a slightly different setup for the views. I'm not sure what that's going to entail, but it definitely would work in a classroom, I think, as well.
Yeah. I think that the classrooms are a good example. Any kind of meetings. There's also multiple spotlight where you can spotlight up to 9 people at a time. Just know that if someone's got an older version, I think everybody here is guaranteed in our webinar is guaranteed to see what you have selected if you do multi-spotlight, but we're kind of a rare case of that. So you might have people who have older versions that won't see it. And if someone joins Zoom on a web page, they only see speaker view. So something to know when you're running this thing, they don't ever see the grid. Bill?
Yeah, this I think goes back to the the development of television in control rooms, there was always a preview and program, and everybody who had to make any sort of TV to send out to the world, you always knew from the very first day, this is not on the air. I'm getting it ready to go on the air. This is on the air. As this has gotten more complex and everybody has become their own personal broadcaster, it is too bad that they didn't keep at least that function in all of these things, but they were designed for a different thing. And I think it's just, we're trying to make it work the way that idea was originally developed, which was a really good idea. It really helped you present a polished show.
And Guy, what are you showing there?
Just what it looks like at the bottom of the participant's screen that you want to click on. So for Stuart, this is, I believe, what he's got it on is follow host view, and instead of active speaker, because active speaker will just do active
Follow,
speaker.
yeah,
And if you
those
put it
are-
on
yeah.
follow host view, that's the important one that allow you to, when you go to gallery, for everybody to follow your view and go to
Right.
gallery. And then
Yeah.
when you go back to active speaker, they can see the active
And the one thing
speaker.
I usually
So
turn
that's-
off is the play chime when enter and exit. That makes me crazy. Like that's that means every time someone comes and goes, you hear a little ding, which I think is useful for teachers and people running meetings. I don't. I think that it's because I grew up very ADHD that I am extremely sensitive to extraneous notifications. You know, I just don't. I don't like them at all. Like I'm bitter about them when they show up. Go ahead, Jeff.
Guy, that menu you were showing, is that a host option?
Yeah,
the host
that's
is choosing
only
that
host, so
for
that-
Only the host.
for the webinar. Okay.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it's only the host and not co-hosts because, you know, it's a weird, the whole thing, you know, again, we're trying to do something with it that it wasn't designed to do, but it's still a very kind of frustrating experience. It's probably one of the weakest points in Zoom at the moment is the ability to manage what people are seeing. Go ahead, Guy.
Actually, I believe, yeah, I can still spotlight. Like if I wanted to take over as a co-host, I can say spotlight Bill for everyone right now.
No, you
I think I
could, but you'd have to spotlight all the time, and then that would drive us crazy. You know, like
well,
that's
what I'm saying is, as a co-host, so I can take control. Like if the host, you know, something happens to him,
Yeah.
I can take.
you could. It would just for the panelists, it would be catastrophic. You know,
Right,
like
'cause
you know,
knocked
like we
me
would.
out of grid into
Because we get knocked out all the time, and so it's not. Yeah, you definitely can do it. You could run a show with Spotlight, but once you go into Spotlight, does it go back to grid? I don't know if it does, because I know when you turn Spotlight on for us and then you turn it off, it still stays in speaker view. So I don't know. I think you would, as soon as someone started spotlighting for the viewers, it would probably stay in speaker mode from then on. Schy.
Well, and to Guy's point, I'm following on the YouTube channel, and yes, Bill was spotlighted,
Mhm. Yep.
so that also goes out the stream.
Yep. Jeff.
So, Stuart, what are you seeing on your multitude of screens? And can you stay in gallery even though you're allowing the attendees to follow speaker view?
Well, that's going to be fun because now I'm seeing myself on the speaker view. If I switch that now to gallery view, I'm guessing everybody will see that. We'll see the gallery together, and we can watch as Victor almost coughed, but he had his mute over his microphone.
Yep.
So what I got distracted. What was the question again, Guy?
Can you be in speaker view? Can you control the view and be in gallery view at the same time? Can you be projecting speaker view? And I think that I think the second monitor lets you do that, because then you're able to, I believe, pin something
The
on that.
second monitor that I've got in front of me only seems to stay on the speaker view.
Yeah, I'm
Gallery view is only available. There's no options to. Oh, hang on. It's actually got remove pin. Let me just double check that.
yeah. I have
That's the second monitor feature in Zoom. That's
Yeah.
You have the second monitor feature. If you turn that off, that changes things again.
Yeah, I'm monitoring on my iPad up here, and I did see your switch to gallery view, but I did not see that on my return, and it knocked my monitor on my main screen from gallery to speaker.
Right.
So there's all sorts of changing going on.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Next question is the one that we postponed. Larry Jacobson in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I played Mickey and Guy for a weekly small group we attend, which is a virtual group right now. It went very well, but when I shared the ability for the leader to share his screen, we were both sharing screens, it changed my keystroke and click for mute drop down. Any ideas or experience with this?
I am adamant about the fact that I don't use any keystrokes for mute. Like I click on, I always click on the mute button. If you see me like cough, clear my throat, take a drink, I do it all the time. And I click on it with my mouse. I will not use the keys, because the number one reason people are stuck in mute on Zoom is because they're using the keys. Like I get it. It works most of the time. It doesn't work all the time. That's the issue. It does not work all the time. So that's my experience with it, is that I don't do it. Go ahead, Schy.
My left hand is right on the keyboard. On the Apple, it's Command Shift A, and it'll cut me right off if I just.
But number one, I get it that it worked right now, but I'm just telling you that the number one reason when people are suddenly muted when they didn't know that they were muted is because they were using the keys. Like when we started doing this, we would constantly be like, just click on it, and so it works 95% of the time, and so you can do it as an example.
Bar. The space bar was the problem, but the Command Shift A is pretty solid for me.
Pretty solid. Like I'm just saying, it's pretty solid. Is not going to work for me anyway, Jeffrey.
Yeah, in Windows, if you go off of Zoom at all, and that could be, there you could get a pop-up, or if you got your notifications going, that could pop up, and then that takes it right off the screen, and then next thing you know, that space bar doesn't even work.
No, and Command Shift A, there is a button that you can use that feature, even though the Zoom window is buried six windows deep.
I just think that, especially given what happened to a person of the press in the last, this week, that thinking that things are automatic and just assuming that they're working is a horrible idea. Now, I would never do anything that would get me into that much trouble, but I'm just saying that is a good example of what happens when we start assuming that everything's doing what it's supposed to do. Do not assume anything about the stuff. Like that's the whole thing. Like, don't assume it's going to work. Don't assume that it's, I'm just saying, like, especially as we do production, you just want to be very careful of any kind of assumption related to the hardware or software. Anyway, next question.
Next question comes to us from Brett Ramsey of Melbourne, Australia. Question for Schy and others who have used StreamYard. What do you think of it, and can it be used in conjunction with Zoom? Restream has not worked well for Brett.
Go ahead, Schy.
Okay. I was expecting it to be more robust. It's not. It is cloud-based switching with the ability to do overlays and lower thirds and backdrops, and it has many other features. That it is also a distributor to your different platforms. I think it's got 3 platforms that it can do. It does have 10 callers, I think they call it, limitation, but it's for the price. Are you kidding me? What it can do is pretty magical. And unlike Zoom is a very good video conferencing, and that I'm very interested in the Zoom, is it not Zoom Go, the new Zoom TV concept as also another distribution platform. So it's a different tool. I liked it.
Yep. Neil?
Yeah, we use it at Google a lot for Waze and Google for Startups and other Google corporate events. We've found that it's extremely robust in terms of getting a video with participants to present and have viewership be watched on YouTube itself. In terms of getting that viewership streamed into Zoom, you can do it with a second computer and basically having that computer full screen YouTube as another participant. But one of the things you really want to watch out for is having audio loops when you do that. It can start getting a little cluster smucked, and it's a little bit annoying in that regards when you want to start doing a third party app in addition to what you're doing. But like Schy said, for the price, and that it can do 10 participants, 1080p, you can stream up to 8 places simultaneously and do virtual switching with branding graphics live. It's pretty much in a league of its own.
Jeffrey?
Cluster smucked. I like that one. The bottom line is that Streamyard is going to be just like Restream in something like this. It's really not meant to do this type of situation. So if you just what you just said with screen scraping, that'll be your best bet, but it's still not going to be the best thing in the world.
You can
And
also
get something that could work a little bit better.
You can also originate in Zoom and then send it to StreamYard as well, I believe. I mean, use RTMP, to it. So you could do the Zoom meeting itself inside of here and then send it to Restream if you wanted and add more things to it and send it out. So there's a couple different options there. Does it auto switch, Neil or Schy?
No, it does not auto switch. It's all manual. But you have you can do side by side up to 3 people. You can do 16 by 9. You can do then one presenter with small people, and then you can do one presenter with small slides, and then switch that or full screen slides. It's got about I think 8 different layout options.
That's cool.
If you want to see how to not do it, I'll post my last Saturday's experience, because I was learning all the way through that you can remove people and not have the entire gallery view. You can just put 1 or 2 or 3, and then it's got live moving capabilities, so that you want to move.
Did you want to talk at all about Saturday?
My Saturday upcoming, we're doing a second experience again with Madeline, but this time with a gentleman in Los Angeles who's a chef.
How did last week go for you?
You were not in the room, but I'll be. Thank you.
I watched a little of it.
Oh, well, I'd more prefer to hear your perspective. For me, being a one-man band, it was an octopus with 8 arms in a room that needed 12. and I ran out about 4, because it was just, I'm used to working with a crew, and we were working with the talent's husband as the main camera, and he's an architect, and he was hanging in there, but he was in the deep end of production that he never realized he married into. So the experience was fun, and that's what we're going to continue to have, because we're learning all along the way. The people at the other end, I love the best quote, again, from Office Hours. Bruce from Chicago showed up, and he brought a lot of experience and fun and technology.
I saw Bruce there. I was like, I see Bruce. I was like,
I know
that guy. I know
you
Bruce.
Do know Bruce.
I was like, how did Bruce get to Seattle? Like that was my question.
Well, that was the favorite quote in the chat. They were going, "Oh, she's a chef," and "Oh, she's a chef," and "Who's Bruce?" Anyway.
I knew Bruce. I was like, I knew Bruce. So anyway,
but he brought it. He brought his own food, and he brought the experience. So he had fun.
And if you can post a link into is it up still?
Of course. In fact, we're going to trim it. We're going to try to, again, from a scripting point of view, and from a producer that has done what she has done. We want to get a run of show much tighter, so that we can consolidate it down to an 8-minute post show.
Technically, I think that the thing that I was left with is that there's the challenge always when you don't have a large crew is keeping your elbows in, or and I think that what I will tend to do is make a show simpler. Like I'm always looking for how do I do something where I'm at 60 to 80 or 40 to 60% of my capacity.
Yeah.
That if I can't do it, if I look at something and go, I'm going to be at 120% capacity, I just figure out, well, how do we simplify the show? How do we take a bunch of things out if I don't have that not how do I figure out how to do 120% capacity, but how do I figure out how to simplify and take it out? And I think that was what I was left with, is it felt like you were at about 200% capacity.
We were, well, in this week, what's fun is we have additional help that has shown up.
Oh, that's great.
And so we're going to have what was the concept she did, how she brought Stephen Colbert in originally. We're going to have a remote person that's going to be reading, and she's, Marissa is going to join us, and she will be the remote reporter in the field.
Right, that's great. So anyway, it's great to test. It's a real it's great to have high quality hosts that are willing to experiment with you, because that's the hard part.
Well, we keep referring to it as a soft launch.
Yeah, exactly.
But even with that, we had 800 viewers on Facebook alone. So
Yeah, absolutely. Neil?
Yeah, real short. If you want to see how StreamYard could be used in conjunction with in an online event, I would recommend checking out EventPlace, EventPlace.tech. They use StreamYard as their back end and incorporate that into live events.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Paul Wallace from here on the panel, and actually a follow-on to what we were discussing before the show today. The Texas Book Festival has chosen Crowdcast to stream their mega event, which used to fill the Capitol of Texas building and had rows of huge circus tents all over downtown. Any thoughts, and particularly about Crowdcast versus Zoom?
Has anyone used it? I used it in the early days, and the video was so bad that I just stopped using it, and I haven't come back. And I'm told that the video has gotten better. So it was like 640 by 360 that looked like it had been scaled up twice. You know, it was a really, really, really bad video experience, and so I just wrote it off. But I'm told now that it is better as far as that goes. But I haven't experimented with it yet. I think that again, what I keep on. I think we were talking about Adobe Max a little bit before the show. I think that there's two things. One is there's a whole bunch of challenges right now that we're having. One is it's not going to be the platform that's the problem in a lot of ways. It is trying to fit a physical event into a virtual event is the biggest problem, followed by people who don't take that seriously. If you had a physical event, people have to go to a hotel and then they have to show up, and then there's a green room and there's a thing, but now they don't want to show up until 5 minutes before to do their talk, or they don't want to invest. They don't take the people who are successful are taking their booth budget and, from one of these conventions and spending it on the event, like putting that money into something that they were, they already had the money allocated. The ones that are trying to do it on a shoestring are the ones that are falling apart. If you look at Adobe Max, that's a lot of the problems that they had were trying to do things, either they didn't know, or they didn't try, or they didn't, whatever it, and I think that a lot of times if the person paying knew that it was going to be a mess, they would have paid more. Because for most brands, if you're Samsung or someone else, the most expensive part of a project is failure. And I think that most people will, but I think that what we're about to see is a huge investment in, again, we were talking about this before the show. If we keep doing virtual events, within a year, we won't be able to go back to physical, in my opinion. We will not be able to go back to physical events. Physical events will be a portion of the virtual event. It'll be like the physical, like, hey, there's a little party and there's some people here and everything else, but it'll never be the same again. Like, it's over. Because right now everyone's failing, but they'll stop failing. Like by next spring, they're going to stop failing. And we're already seeing it. I mean, I don't know how Apple does what it just did in its last event. I don't know how it does that in a physical event again. Like, it will feel really slow. Like, if you go back to a physical event, the viewer won't be able to readjust, and I don't think it'll take them very long to figure that out when they're doing rehearsals, and so we're going to have to, all the particles are going to start changing, because now all these companies are hiring head of global digital events and head of this, and Amazon just did that, and Adobe just did that, and so I think that you're going to start seeing much different events middle of next year. And because I think a lot of people are getting the grips, we're not going to have big events for at least another year, and that's if vaccines work, and if people will take them, and if they're even effective, and if COVID ever ends. I think there's a lot of ifs there, and so so I think people are now sinking into that they're going to have to. That could be years before things go back to normal. Paul.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer my own question. Chris Fenwick warned me about that yesterday. But the Texas Book Festival is an incredible event. I mean, it spills out all down Congress Avenue, these giant circus tents filled with books, authors signing books. It's just hard to imagine how you would replicate that in a
we've done book signings on we did book signings on Hangouts, and it was incredibly fun. So we had a discussion with an author. We did this a couple times. You have a discussion with the author, and then we actually had a Wacom tablet in Photoshop that we were operating in the back end. So she didn't have to know anything about it. And what we would do is just keep on creating new layers. You know, and so she talked to someone over the Hangout. Like first we'd have a discussion with her and with the moderator. And the moderator would be bringing questions in from online, and they'd be answering all these questions. And then one person would get to come up and ask a question, whoever was special, a fan, or it was something like that. I don't know how they got picked, but they got picked. They got to have a little conversation with the author. And then she said, "Can I sign the book for you?" And they said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And so then she signs it on, and we cut to it, and she signs it on Photoshop. So it just looks like a thing. But what that was is obviously a layer with transparency. And then we just turn that one off and turn the next one on. When she goes to the next person, we had already named all the layers of who that person is. And so she say to this person, da, 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 da. And then we didn't send the book. We just printed out the book cover with the thing and sent it in a little plaque. You know, so it's not quite the same as a book signing, but it was better. Like you put the thing that was signed to Cindy from, you know, the author, and put it up on their wall, you know. So it looked really nice, and they remember that moment because they were able to talk to the author that they were a big fan of. And so I'll be honest, I've been to book signings. That was a way better. The virtual version of that was infinitely better than being in person, because I didn't have to stand in line. I didn't have to do all the other weird stuff that you have to do to get there. Wasn't all packed in. And, you know, that's the whole thing, is that and that author had a discussion with 3,000 people right before the book signing, you know, just, you know, because, you know, we're broadcasting it. So 3,000 people get to sit there and ask questions and be part of it and everything else. And then she signs the, and you know, it was super simple, you know, for her to do that. Now we were in the room, so I don't know how you do it in a perfectly virtual way, and I'd have to think about that a little bit. But it was, we did that 8 years ago, you know, and I haven't. It was one of those things, like I was so busy for so long, and then I didn't have any equipment, but. You know, I talked to book companies or book reps here about doing that again. And it was just that I couldn't do it for $500, you know? And so there has to be you know, that they have to see what it's like, but it's way more effective. And I feel like right now, because of COVID, there are so many opportunities because people are desperate to figure out how to do what they were doing before, you know? And so before they were in this rut, everyone was in a rut of physical. Now they're like, what do I do? You know? And so they're willing to start putting money towards things that they wouldn't do otherwise. And that is going to be why when we get to the end of next year, the world will be different forever, because it's not right now. People are sinking in. They're going to have to do this for another year and possibly forever. And so they're like, and once all the technology around it evolves, because you look at Zoom keeps on changing, all these Zoom and Teams and Streamyard and everything else, all of them are changing so fast. They're evolving so quickly because of the opportunity that surge of technology is going to, you know, is going to wipe everything else out the way we do it. It doesn't mean we won't have any physical events, but it'll never be the way it was before. I mean, we'll be able to tell our kids about the 50,000 people that used to show up in one place. That was crazy. Jeffrey?
Yeah, it sounds like startup could be created from there, where you basically have the ability to where they sign a book or sign a photo or something like that, and then they record that one-on-one conversation with you, and you just get that in the mail within 3 days. I remember getting photos in the mail all the time years ago from artists, and I don't know why that just can't be implemented again.
No, I think it's there's a whole possibility there. We'll see. Anyway, next question.
TJ Asher from the panel often is in mourning, techno mourning, I guess you'd call it today, because his 30-inch Apple Cinema display died, and he wants recommendations to replace it. He needs both size, 21 by 60 by 1600 minimum, and color accuracy. He doesn't need retina resolution. Ideally, he says it'd have to have 100 pixels per inch resolution, and he tried the Dell 42-inch 4K, but it was just too big. He has a Dell 30-inch currently.
Anybody any opinions? Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't have an opinion, but he did correct his question that it's 2560, not 2160. Horizontal.
Anyone else?
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Schy.
Dream color used to be a thing. I don't know, is it still? And that was the hybridization of DreamWorks and HP, I think. and it was very much used in a lot of the animation houses in Los Angeles. It was a low end cost comparatively. Panasonic had some really good monitors there for a while. Sony, of course, is the go-to, but I think what you're asking for is a computer monitor. I'd love to hear too.
The one that a lot of folks that I've worked with are using is the BenQ. BenQ has a really accurate and bright monitor that I've seen a lot of people. We've used their projectors, and they're great projectors. But the BenQ 27-inch, I think, is where I see a lot when people aren't going crazy. Like that's the less than $1,000 monitor that does that, and then there's the 10,000 and above monitors that are different. Go ahead, Kev, and then Stuart.
Well, I was just thinking, I noticed he wanted 100 pixels per inch type thing. And the only thing I was thinking of, ironically, was the Surface Studio 2. I think they do that, where it's 1-to-1 with a basic A4. So you could use that possibly as a monitor. I know technically it's got a built-in PC, but you can just bung it as a monitor. I wish they'd make it separate, but it's something worth looking at.
Yep.
Certainly got the color registration you'd be looking for.
Mm-hmm. Stuart?
One of the saddest days of 2020 for me was when my BenQ 24 decided to die after about 10 years of service.
Yeah,
they're a brilliant little product, but I wonder why TJ doesn't just look at maybe buying a second-hand 30-inch Apple Cinema display.
Technology's come a long way. I think
is this such a thing?
I think a 27-inch. I think BenQ has like an HDR 27-inch. It's like $700-800. I think it's a pretty good monitor. Neil?
Yeah, I just pulled this up. I'd seen it a little bit ago. Asus ProArt is a 32-inch monitor that has HDR10, HLG, 99% of DCI P3, and 1200 nits peak brightness with delta E's of less than about 1.
Yeah.
I haven't used it personally, but I saw a review a while ago about it.
I'm leaning towards the BenQ myself. I'm probably going to get one just for my monitoring because I need something that does HDR10, Schy.
Well, and that's the challenge too, is also your pitch, I believe it's called. Where do you have to sit to get the best view?
Right.
And that will really hose you if you've got it way up here and you don't tilt it correctly. You'll get a weird shifting of inaccurate color or even image.
Well, I'm pretty, if I'm doing anything this color monitor, I actually am very conscious to my angle of incidence to the monitor. It's almost perfectly perpendicular all the time. I don't vary that very much. And you're right that it's super important, but it's more of, you'll never find a monitor that lets you do that from very many angles as well as they say it will. Anyway, next question.
Larry Jacobson in Cheyenne, Wyoming says, I used my Logitech C-920 atop my iMac for a meeting last night, sound and video. People heard a fan noise when I unmuted about 1 hour into the meeting. Is the fan in the iMac likely to cause this? I will switch sound to my Motu M2, an external mic, next meeting. When is it better not to use original sound? Note his 2017 iMac Retina Quad i5 24 gigabyte RAM with only Zoom and Safari running. It wasn't hot to the touch.
This gets back into the physics problem of inverse square law. So the closer the mic is to you, the better it's going to sound. And so little cheap mics in your computer or in your webcam are never going to be very good, and they're going to be highly likely to pick up fans. If you're using that, you should absolutely turn off original sound and let it do as much as much correction as it can. If you have a really good mic and a good pipeline, then turn on original sound, and you'll sound better. But you don't want to use. You want to try to avoid using the built-in mics in general. But if you do, I would definitely leave original sound off to let Zoom do some of the lifting for you and make it a little bit better than it is. Since no one else is raising their hand, we'll go to the next question.
Mike Henderson of Colorado is in with, have folks been using OBS version 26 for the Mac? Has it been stable?
Has it ever been stable? Anyway, go, John.
I run OBS for a long time. All the betas, all the release candidates, haven't had any issues. It seems to run better on PC than on Mac, but I haven't had it crash yet.
Right. Okay. I've always found OBS to be a little funky on the Mac and rock solid on the PC because it's just 99% of the OBS users are on the PC. So it's just more, it's not more of a focus. It's just more users complaining about it. Like there's, so it's just much more robust on the PC because of the user base. Anyway, next question.
Charles Klein in New York City says, what does the panel think about an internet backup in the inevitable event your internet goes down from road workers doing what they do? On average, he's delivering 1 to 20 gigabyte video files.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
I'll just unmute myself. This is the little Netgear MR1100 that we use for doing our live streaming when there's no direct network connection. If I just flip the little rubber things down on the end, as you can see, you've got an Ethernet connection, a USB-C to charge with, and the little tiny connections out to a external amplified aerial. The great thing about these things with the software inside them is you can have them hanging on your network and tell that to do its data offloading to a Ethernet or Wi-Fi based connection, and then the moment that physical or that wired connection fails, it switches over to the 4G based inside it, so it keeps you online the whole time. So it's a better way of using it.
Yeah, you can also use things like in a bigger version of that is like the PepWave. Is it PepLink or PepaWave is the company, I think. I always get it wrong. That they make ones where you can put a bunch of modems in. You can put 3 or 4 modems in there. You can give it an Ethernet. You can have it look at Wi-Fi, and then you can in the router make decisions about what it's using when, so that it can drop into whatever it needs to. And we use those in our trucks. So that we can plug it in and it just does it. But if it means that we're up and running very fast. Jeffrey and then Guy.
Yeah, it's in enterprise IT. It's called the SD-WAN technology, and I actually have an SD-WAN box. We have a client that we're doing some video for, and I had a conference a couple weeks ago where I had this problem happen. The internet was being repaired because a squirrel got into the lines. And I used the SD-WAN, hooked up my phone to the other end. So every time they had to take down the main line, it had a supplemental on there. And as for what you just said, it's called the PepLink Balance. And that was the non-enterprise version of that. And I was going to show that as well.
That's great. Guy.
So, Stuart, you'll be glad to hear that there is a new version of that Nighthawk called the M5. And there's a guy, Chris Carson of Steady Ready, who just did a test on it. And he's this guy who went in and modded that M1. You can go in and change some of the settings so that there's some, I don't know if it's frequencies, but there's some, when you're connected to a cell tower, there's some that are more for emergency or there's priority. And so he used to hack his, and now you don't have to do that with the M5 to achieve these crazy speeds. So take a look at the M5 coming out. Well, it's already shipping, actually. I haven't been able to get one from AT&T to replace my M1, though. They're still coming soon.
Isn't that the 5G enabled one? I'd heard it's coming out. I hadn't heard it had been released yet.
Yeah,
because there's also
shipping.
the 2100, which is the updated version of this.
I'll put a link in the chat to this one right here. Yeah, it's called the MR5200.
Yeah, John Preto.
Just wanted to share the natural predator of fiber is the backhoe.
Yeah, exactly. Very much.
or a snowplow.
Yeah,
or a shovel.
At Las Vegas Convention Center, it's the forklift. We had one. We were doing one for Panasonic where we ran all different parts of their booth, and one of the big things that we did is we ran 2 routes to every location that we had to do a drop, and it seemed like a lot of extra work and a lot of extra fiber to do 2 routes completely separate from each other, completely up 2 different directions, and we lost a third of our cables and not one route. Fortunately, we had a route to every one, but it's only because we did backups like that. And then what we did is from those points we ran Teradex, Teradex, the bolts, so that we could go to different locations and then roam around free, wirelessly. The problem in LVCC specifically is, especially during NAB or CES, it is a connection hole. I mean, it just sucks in like a black hole, but it just sucks in connections, and there's just dead spaces everywhere, and there's so much interference that it's really hard. So you really want to stay close. And so anyway, yeah. So forklifts are another one. Go ahead, Stuart, and then we'll move on.
2 little things I forgot. One is these things are absolutely not a PoE device.
Copy.
And I almost smelt the smoke come out. Almost. I was quick enough to save it. But the other thing is, deep inside it, you can put a micro SD card, and you can have that as online storage. So if you need to swap files around your
that's interesting.
intranet,
Yep.
you can basically have it as a baby NAS.
That's very cool. Next question.
Steve Machaz is from Metro West, Massachusetts, and wants to talk green screen. He's got a 9x9 cloth green screen and wants to know what type of lights and light modifiers would you recommend to light it evenly with a $500 budget? I'll pop in on that.
Sorry, Bill.
Well, okay, for me, the first thing I do is think, what am I trying to get? Am I trying to get just head and shoulders, or am I trying to get full length? Because even a 9x9 is almost iffy if you're trying to do top to bottom, toe to head. And how far back your camera position is has to do with how you're going to light it, because obviously most of us who are in front of these fake backgrounds, the camera angle to it means that we don't really have to light the whole thing edge to edge absolutely perfectly. So the shot geometry is the first place I'd pay attention to. If you truly do have to light a 9x9 or something relatively large, edge to edge perfectly, you're pretty much going to be going with broad sources. Normally those would be 4-foot banks of fluorescent tubes to get a lot of light going. And you have to be careful about how you set it up, because when you're in that kind of a big rig situation with overhead maybe under and maybe side lighting, you're going to have problems in the center keeping your light levels up without a lot of instruments.
So I've shot a few thousand episodes on a 9x9 screen. So a couple things about it. One is we only use, this will blow your budget if you've already gotten a green cloth, but composite components Lycra, I've used it all over the world. You stretch it, and then you spray it with water, and then you wait an hour and a half, and there's no wrinkles. And it's perfectly, and there's something that they put, there's something about it that keys better than everything else. It's not just the color, and I can't quite figure it out, but Jonathan Erland thought about this for a long time, and he's been making these for a long time. And so they are the standard, and you can get them in long ones, you can get short ones, whatever, but composite components is the only way to go as far as a 9x9, in my opinion. I bought cheaper ones because I was cheap and I wanted some extra ones, and they're just horrible. So, like I have not found a cloth one that is in even 50% as good as the composite components. And you just have to remember, when you do green screen, you are trading money for time. Like when you get a cheap setup, just know that you're going to spend way more time fixing it for way less quality. So it's worth trying to dig down and get better equipment, because, and again, I was shooting 10 to 12 hours of green screen, 10 to 12 hours of green screen a month for years. So it's, it all over the world and locations and everything else. And so I'm pretty sensitive to the cost of it not going right. But someone asked us one time, they were like, how much does it cost? Like a couple of days of shooting and compositing. They just want it back with alpha channels so they can put it over whatever they want. And I said, oh, it's $26,000. And they said, well, what happens if we shoot it ourselves? And I said, it's $35,000. I was like, and I'd have to see the footage before I tell you it's 35,000. It might be 50, like for me to do the post for somebody else, because almost nobody does green screen very well, and so it's all about everything. The trick to shooting green screen is the shooting part. It's not the keying part. The keying part, the tools are super easy, especially if you know how to key it, if you know how to shoot it. And so the key is what we did all over the world constantly is 4x4 banks. So these are 4-foot banks that are 4 Kinoflow lights. We used green lights, so we call it green on green. And we made those lights are about 4 feet from the screen on either corner, and they're pointed across each other to the piece there. We then flag them, and the person standing in front of them is a minimum of 5 feet and generally 10 feet from that screen. The camera is another 20, 25 feet out. And the reason we do that is because it allows us to zoom in, and we get the most out of that screen when we, so we don't have to, the closer you get to the camera, the wider the angle and the bigger the screen has to be. So as you pull that camera away and you zoom in, you're flattening that whole piece, and you also start dropping the screen out. By pulling the person away from the screen, you will also shorten you don't have to shorten the depth of field. You can do a 5.6 or whatever, and it's going to blur the back of that. When they're 10 feet away from that screen, it's going to blur that screen, which means all the little imperfections and all the other weird stuff goes away too. So it just becomes this nice soft green in the background. And when you don't have to do it this way, but I can tell you that when you go down that path and you work really hard at getting the right space and and if you're going to do a lot of it, if you're going to do a couple of things, it doesn't matter, do whatever you're going to do. But if you're going to turn it into a machine and do this a lot, and make it easy and you could have a low skill. We had interns keying because they didn't need to know. I mean, they literally we set up a setting for them and they just go click and it was done. Every little hair is keyed, but you do that by all the front end work to make that work. And then you want to capture at the highest resolution you can. Grain is an issue, but we don't do any kind of despill. I mean, we do unspill, but that's a whole nother thing. So anyway, so that's my long tirade about this, because as someone who is, man, that was my life for beginning of Mac Break, all those Mac Break videos, everything else. And I did a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of stupid things, and we settled into something that just turned into a machine, and we just, and I will say we made a good living doing that for a while until we moved to live. Jeffrey, Neil, and then Stuart.
Really quick, I've talked about this before. Fabric LED lights are awesome for doing the lighting, because not only can you
don't have enough
create
power.
A straight panel. What's that?
They don't have enough power for green screen. I've never seen a fabric light have enough power for green screen.
Well, I don't know. I've used these lights before, and for what I'm doing, they work great. But yeah, it might not be for high-end studio production, but they cover a lot. And the best part is you can start bending them to get the lights in the little nooks and crannies if you need to.
Yeah, I mean, we just use them for a bunch of interviews that we did. They're gorgeous to use. The fabric ones, they're light boards, I think, that you just pop them up, and they're super light and thin, and we used a 4x4 foot one that worked really well. But I didn't think that there would be enough light. The ones I've tested in the past, there was not enough light coming out of them to do the green screen at the level that I'm trying to do it at. Neil, and then Stuart.
Yeah, I don't really know the whole breakdown of what his budget would include, if it's the green lighting for the green screen plus the fabric, or plus your talent lights. But your talent lighting and the light for the green screen are not the same lights.
Yeah, it should be different. Yeah, definitely. There's all kinds of bad when you start combining them. You have the shadow, you have the wrong colors, you have the, the big thing is you have to be able to control the exposure for both. You can't, otherwise you can't tune the green, because you want your green screen, you want your green in the RGB parade to be at 70%, and then you want 40 points between the green and the red and the blue. And to get that straight across is extremely difficult without, it's impossible if you share the lights. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Guy.
Just a reminder that we did cover the scopes part of green screen last week. So if anyone wants to go back to YouTube and have a look at last week's episode, there's information there. But on a pure budget orientated and budget limited point of view, it's kind of like when you used to be buying stereos, they used to say put 50% of your money on your amplifier and 50% on your speakers. For green screen, when your budget's $500, put $400 on the green screen and $100 on your lighting.
I agree.
Get the best possible green screen you can.
You're right. I mean, the quality of the green screen is a big deal. The other thing to do is that KinoFlow, if you do green on green, you only need a 2x4. You don't need a 4x4. A 2x4 might even get away with a 1x4. It doesn't, when it's pure green, it doesn't need to be nearly as bright. And you can buy those on eBay. They're very durable. I mean, if they're working, you plug them in. The 4x4s that I'm using here, I bought on eBay, and I got two 4x4s with the tubes in a case for like $1,000, and that's way more than you need. So you might be able to get those lights, a 2x4, two bulbs 4 feet long with green bulbs, which are hard to find now because they're out of, for KinoFlow, I think, stopped making them. But if you can find them, we were able to, with the green bulbs, green on green, solve so many problems. If you can light your subject separately, I can go get seamless green paper at the photo store and key it nearly perfectly with green on green, with two green on green keynotes on either, two 4-foot keynotes on either side. So it fills in a lot of issues. But you have to have enough space. You can't let that green light touch your subject. So you have to flag it off, and there has to be enough space to do it. Anyway, next question.
Dirk Brewer of Guatemala says, considering that sometimes it's necessary to give instructions to new Zoom guests, it will be practical to implement a greeting message to inform when entering, since the chat only shows messages from the moment they enter. WhatsApp Business has this feature and is very practical. Note this would be used to show Mukana's link. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. It wasn't Willett. It was.
Well, the problem is that there's no. The problem in
Sounds like he
Zoom
wants
right
a
now is
greeting
that
on there.
the problem in Zoom is that when you join, you never see the history of the chat. That's what he's talking to.
Oh, okay. So you come in at time. Yeah.
So that's why it's constantly being Mukana's constantly being added. Anyway, let's go to the next question. That's the issue. There's no solution right now, other than putting up you could put up a screen. You could put up another window that just had a link published there, but there's no way to do it in the chat. It's just the way that the function works. There's no historical part of that. Next question.
Dan Huber from Erie, I'm assuming Pennsylvania. When sharing a second USB source in Zoom, does it also send 360p or can it be 720p? Note for like a dock cam.
Go ahead, Guy.
I'm willing to throw it up as a test. Last time we did this, I tried doing the same camera that I was using, but now I actually have a second webcam hooked up. So I'll hit screen share, content from second camera, share, and switch camera. So what are you seeing? Can somebody check? Or wait, what camera is that? Is that this one? Yeah. Yep. So that's the HuddleCam.
My screen share says 1080. Stats?
So, and now what frame rate are you getting if I'm kind of waving my arms around? This is
15 maybe.
Is everybody seeing that in the grid view or the second screen? Because I've got this thing set to speakers.
Well, this is technically a screen share.
I'm not seeing Guy's second camera in the speaker view.
It's a share screen.
I'm getting 320 by 180, and then now it's popped up.
Cool.
No, 256 by 144.
Well, now because
receiving. No, you got to go to share. You got to go. There's audio, video, and then there's share screen. And if you go to share screen, it would give you that resolution.
Yep,
it's not giving me anything.
That looked pretty good. Yep. I mean, but we're only getting 15 FIPS. People are saying.
I think it looked like in the mid-20s. Mid-20s, yeah. You could definitely see it. You could definitely see that it wasn't 30 frames a second. But it looked really sharp. So for something that you're showing, that would totally work. So that I think that's probably the right answer. Next question.
Next question comes from Ivan Obrigazzo from Mercer Island. Looking for recommendations for cameras for my Atem Mini Pro under $350. Would you buy a Lumix GH2 used camera or a HuddleCam as a webcam? What camera would you buy?
I think it would depend on what I'm trying to do with it. Like if it's on me, I want short depth of field. If it's something that's going to be more utilized, I'm going to use it for everything. The HuddleCam might be a better solution because it's you have a lot more control. Schy and then Paul.
I would go with a GH4 or 5, not a GH2.
But you can't get a 4 or 5 under $350.
A used one?
A used one, maybe.
Well, he said used. I'm just saying I have a GH2. It times out. Its battery life and throughput doesn't seem as stable. The GH4, I can leave it on all day, even on one battery. So that's a consideration. It does have a funky little HDMI cable. It's not the tiny one, and it's not the regular one. It's somewhere in between.
Yeah, Paul, and then
I agree on that funky HDMI cable. I have a GH5, wonderful camera for shooting film. It's great. I mean, if you want to make a film or something like that, it's a cult filmmaker's camera. As far as the HuddleCam, it's a great camera, but you've got to spend a lot of time in the settings. I mean, it's got umpteen settings, and you can go up and down the settings, and you think you've got it right, and then you tweak something, and you got to reset it and retweak it. Be prepared to spend a lot of time tweaking with the HuddleCam.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Is that HuddleCam USB cam? Because that will not work with the Atem.
It's got a USB and a
gotcha. Thanks.
HDMI. Yep, it's pretty useful. Anyway, yep. Next, go ahead, Stuart, real quick, and then we'll move on.
Instead of the GH2, I would suggest looking at a G85 or G80, depending on which market you're in, or even the GX85 or 850. They're the same basic sensor, but they're a different body with less features, and the price of those should have come down steeper than the GH4 will have.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I thought that the HuddleCam, it does have a USB out, but I thought that it still needed HDMI out, but it still had the USB to power it, so you still have to plug it into a computer,
Yeah,
right?
but you still have to plug it into some kind. You need to plug it into power, a USB power, but you don't have to plug it into a computer. Next question.
By the way, I apologize for butchering Ivan's name. I said Ivan, and that was just me not reading ahead. I apologize. Tony Moldy's here from Newman, Georgia. Does the Zoom feature of spotlighting up to 9 people work with a Zoom meeting also?
I think it does. I haven't tried it. I just don't do a lot of meetings. I do webinars, as you know. So meetings are kind of the wild, wild west for me. But I think the spotlight will work in all of them. The big thing is knowing whether everyone can see it. So if someone comes in with an old version of Zoom, they'll see the first person that you spotlit, and then you're doing all this cool stuff and you're doing all these edits, and they'll wonder why you're hung on a person that's not talking. So that's the that's the one limitation, is just knowing that that's the case. That's the trick. Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle and from the panel says, what will the job title be for the new role of a remote Zoom operator? Duties may include spotlighting, moderating chat, controlling slides, and removing participants.
Zoomsters.
We break that up into multiple roles. So usually on an event that we're working on, even if it's just in a webinar, we've got one person managing. So the way we kind of build it out is that we have a participant prep manager that's managing the green room. So people are coming in and they're getting managed to make sure that they're ready to go into the event. Then we send them and then there's another person that's onboarding them into the event. So making sure that they show up and paying attention to that. Then you have somebody editing who is, actually cutting the show. And then if you're managing chat, we tend to separate that out as well. You can combine all those roles, but as you combine them, you're losing the show becomes less and less compelling. It's just as you start to do it, it's slower and maybe it doesn't matter, and there's definitely shows where we do it. It's only 2 for a pretty simple webinar. We'll have one person that's the we call him the Zoom engineer, Zoom engineer is what we're calling them. And then there's participant support, and so for smaller events, we'll break it down to just participant support and Zoom engineer. And that's in that. It works pretty well for pretty straightforward meetings. As soon as you start getting things that are complex, you need to have more people. Schy, and then Paul, and then Stuart.
Well, for Microsoft, I was referred to as the Teams producer, and my job was the talent wrangler, making sure they were ready and on cue. We also had Levi, and he was the TD with his TriCaster. And then we had a director who was also the producer that was calling the show. And then, of course, the client in the room kind of observing and thinking, it used to be so much more simple when I just showed up with a PowerPoint and a thumb drive.
Yeah, and when we were doing Hangouts, we call them Hangout operators. Was the kind of the thing too. So it could be Zoom operator as well. And we've gone back and forth between Zoom engineer and Zoom operator. Paul, and then
the title would be RZO, remote Zoom operator. I think I'll add that to my resume.
There you go, Stuart, and then Neil.
Jeffrey's just put a proposed nickname for RZO as Rizzo. But to answer Guy's question, since it's Zoom and spotlighting, Zoom Lighter kind of appeals, but the other probably best answer for it is a remote Mickey.
Remote Mickey. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, just touching on the person organizing a green room and onboarding speakers and such, I wound up cherry picking one of my friends who was a show caller at the National Opera, and those people are meticulous, and a lot of them are looking for work all over the country and around the world. So if you need a good show caller, I recommend reaching out to those who've worked in opera and know that level of timing.
Yeah, and the big thing is you do want a separate person doing participant prep. That's if we go down to 2 people, it's one person running the show and one doing participant prep, because you want someone picking at where they're sitting and their microphone and their other little bits and pieces and all the little bits. And almost every problem we've had is because we weren't doing that for whatever reason. Oh, it's only a record, or oh, it's and the problem is that it's just that person focused on that one thing just really changes how it goes. Anyway, next question.
We in audio, we've always had an A1 and an A2. Maybe it's time for a Z1 and a Z2.
Yeah, there you go.
Moving to Eric Hall of Mount Vernon, Washington, says, can someone do a quick summary of the lowest cost way to switch an NDI device into a Zoom meeting? A camera?
Go ahead, Stuart, and then Jeffrey.
Okay, lowest cost is to get VLC, set its audio and video rendering options to NDI output, then use the NewTek download for the virtual input and tell it to see VLC as its source, and then you tell Zoom to use the NDI source for your audio and video. But expect a delay of about a second and a half.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. NDI Tools becomes your friend on this situation, and in some cases, you don't even need to have a VLC or OBS or any of those. If you have a way to capture it to take it to NDI already, then you just use NDI Tools and that scan converter or not scan converter. It's let me look for a second. It is NDI Virtual Input, which will then take it into Zoom, and you'll see it as a camera and a microphone if you have the audio source.
Next question.
Tony Mobley of Newman, Georgia, occasional panelist, not here today, says, what is the base model iMac needed to do quality video editing in Final Cut Pro, video card, RAM, and so forth?
Go ahead, Bill.
So in the old days, the amount of computer you had made a huge difference, but I have to say on these really more efficient coding structures, and I consider Final Cut Pro 10 and Resolve among those, it is less important to have everything perfect, and most of even the base models will do decent jobs of cutting that kind of video. What you get as you increase your hardware is more snappiness and more capability, but getting the job done in a little more time still is possible on even the more base level computers in the modern era, in my opinion.
Go ahead. Neil Goldstein.
Yeah, I'm actually been researching this lately because I'm getting an editing machine, and the things that I actually found was the recent update in Premiere, specifically with the new 14.2 update, the way that it's integrating hardware acceleration with Radeon products. The 8-core Mac Pro with the 5600M is kind of equivalent to an entry-level iMac, except that it's portable. It's not quite there, but it's good enough there where a lot of people are choosing that as an option because it's portable versus an entry-level iMac, where you'd may want to step up to a 10-core or even an 18-core, depending on what you're doing of base clock and frequencies and things like that.
Schy?
Well, again, the metaphor is how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time. The technical of that is we used to have very specific codecs that were very aligned with the hardware, both the computer, the CPU, and the video card, the GPU, so the graphics processing unit. So Apple decided to put a lot of their on the CPU, on the back end, because they converted all of their files to optimized media, which works best with Final Cut and their video workflow. If you're throwing 8K footage into an iMac, it might be a big elephant. You may want to choose a Premiere that converts it all to a proxy file, because that's what what Apple's going to end up doing for you in the background. So decide what is your elephant when you're shoving it in first. Decide first.
For specifics, just to be, we've talked very philosophically about this. I would consider an i7 to be a minimum chip. Don't go below i7. And I'll get an i9 if I could, but get an i7 if you're doing an iMac, and as fast as an i7 as you're willing to spend, or get an i9. I would consider 16 megs of RAM the minimum, but I generally try not to buy anything lower than 32. I remember when the Mac Pro came out, we were like, 30, what would you do with 32 gigs of RAM? But you need it. So so 32 is a good number. 16 is the bare minimum. Don't get that 8 gig one that they have at the store. So I mean that's what I would say is i7 with 16 gigs is the bare minimum of what I'd buy, knowing that you can also get an eGPU later if you need to turn it up a couple notches.
And can you put your own RAM in
You can.
the iMacs now? And that's go ahead. Listen.
Or they'll do it at the store for you for free. So if you buy the RAM from Apple, you can buy it when you buy the computer, and they'll just do it in 15 minutes while you're standing there. Because I did that recently.
Well, that used to be a thing that you'd go out and find the cheaper
you
RAM.
can do it. Yeah, I don't buy cheaper RAM because RAM is the stability of the hardware. Like we did an enormous. There was a time at Lucasfilm. We spent probably 2 weeks doing some checks on RAM and slowly worked our way through all the RAM until it was just what it needed to be. And then we did a bunch of some checks on all the drives and everything else. And then we threw 750,000 objects into a RAID system, to do Star Wars, all AVR6. And when we called Avid, because it was the Avid was crashing all the time, we called Avid, and they overnighted 2 engineers, not because something was wrong, but because Avid was only built for 150,000 objects, and we had 750,000 objects in there, and that has to do with things like it's RAM will work. All the RAM will work in a day-to-day basis. Start pressing your computer really hard, and you're going to get to the far reaches of that RAM that aren't stable. And so it's pretty good at mapping, but getting great RAM, it makes a huge difference. And we learned very quickly that that computer that's just a little flaky and the computer that's really stable, it's the RAM. It's almost always the RAM that's in those things. And you pull them out and you swap the RAM between the two, and that the one that was flaky and you can't quite put your finger on it. It just got a little memory problem. So
What CPUs were you using? Were you using Macs or Windows?
Back then?
Yeah.
It was
trash cans or
no, it was Star Wars. It was like
cheese graters.
No, way before cheese graters. This is late 90s. This was like pre Steve Jobs. So they were, I don't remember what they were, but it might have been 840 AVs or something like that. It was, or 9100s or.
Oh my gosh.
I'm surprised I can even remember what the name of the box
the 950. That was probably
might have been, yeah. It might have been 950 actually.
I remember the 950s. Yeah.
I remember back in those days, I think I spent $17,000 on a lease on a Mac 2 FX. And I look back at the amount of processing power I had there versus the 16-inch MacBook Pro that sits in there, and the ability of it to shred video on this machine versus what we had to do with the perfect granite digital card so you get enough I/O to do DV. This is just, we're miles past that.
We were doing uncompressed standard def and on a Media 100, and we had to format the drives every week to make sure that we had to reorder everything so that it would run fast enough to run 30 megs a second. 30 megs. Like it has to run 30 megs or we're going to drop a frame. All right, next question.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Paul Wallace from the panel. Oh, no, wait a second. I'm sorry. I skipped John Gerard. I didn't realize somebody moved it. I'm getting the iPhone 12 Pro Max. What's the best way to get my Rode mic with 3.5 millimeter plugs into the iPhone? Should I just use a 3.5 millimeter to Lightning adapter or something else?
Go ahead, Jeff.
That will work, but you will need to get the cable that goes from TRS out of the Rode to TRRS into that Lightning adapter. That'll put the mic in the right place.
Perfect. Next question. Surgical answer.
Surgical answer. Perfect. Paul Wallace of Austin, Texas. When would you use OBS versus vMix on a PC? What would be the determining factors?
I think OBS is a lot simpler. Go ahead, Stuart.
OBS is awkward, but the deciding factor for me is budget. Which one do you have the license for? If you have no budget, you're on OBS. If you have a budget, you get vMix, and it just works.
Yeah, I think that my sister needed to do a stream. It was a funeral actually for the family, and so I had to figure out what to put her on, and I just got her OBS. I got her to download OBS, and I did a screen capture of like 5 minutes on how to use it, and they pulled it off. It was like, and so as far as, it was like a really simple, don't do this, just do this. And I had never used OBS at the time. It was the first time I'd ever downloaded it. And so I'd like looked at it for 10 minutes and figured out vMix is deeper. Like the water is deeper. Like I had trouble figuring out how to get the video out for a little while. So I would say that, you know, from a simplicity perspective, as video professionals, I think we would probably prefer the features of vMix. But if you're just getting started and trying to get going, OBS is a really easy app to just open and turn on. And within a couple minutes, if you watch a couple of YouTube videos, you'll be cutting a basic show without too much trouble. Next question.
We're diving into Bluetooth land. Michael J. of New York City says, hi, Alex, using Audio Hijack to send system audio to my Scarlett and to Bluetooth. Bluetooth audio is consistently behind the system audio. Is there a good tool or plugin to insert in the Bluetooth chain to move the audio early for audio mixing and DJing? Is this even possible?
Bluetooth is always behind. It's the nature of the business. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, audio delay plugins are easy. Audio advance, you're going against the laws of physics. The tool you're looking for is called a wire. Use some wired headphones.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question.
That was fun. Dan Huber from Erie, Pennsylvania, I presume, says, more of an observation than a question. I thought analog sunset would eliminate VGA. Brand new Dell Optiplex have included VGA again. Are we losing these technologies? Or are they hanging on longer? What does everybody think?
There's probably some rare use cases. I mean, analog still, I think Jeff's been dealing with this of needing analog to get signals with zero latency or near zero latency is still that's why some people still need it, is zero latency. You know, with anything that's digitized, is like a Dell monitor is a good example. We assume that Dell monitor is 2 frames off, like 2 frames of latency, all the time. So when you look at it, you can't use a Dell monitor to figure out sync, for a live stream or whatever, because it's not right, and so anyway, so I think there's probably some use cases that turns out a lot of people are buying, probably somewhere in education or military or something, that everyone's buying those Dells and they need that. Sure, they took it out and someone said, hey, I would buy this monitor if you put that thing back in. And they'd say, well, how many are you going to buy? And they'd say 2,000. And they go, okay, we'll put it back in. Anyway, we have a model that used to be there. Anyway, next question.
Some technologies just never die. I can't believe people are still using OMFs after all this time, but they do, and successfully. Chad Lafarge in St. Louis, Missouri says, what is the rock solid RAM that you depend on, Alex?
I have to admit, mine is pretty simple. Is I usually buy the RAM that comes with. I buy it when I buy an Apple product. I just buy the RAM with it because I just know that Apple pays a lot of attention. I know I'm overpaying. I just know that in general it works, and if it doesn't, I can return it and have them give me another one. And I've swapped out RAM a couple times with Apple, and you know what you do? You take it in and they give you a new one. So it's like, and so I don't have to mess around with it. So again, my side is always going to be, I'm super stingy about time and not as stingy about money, because it's just my time, so I have a very specific filter about that. The RAM is, again, as I just said before, it's like critical. It's like this critical thing that no one pays attention to, and they try to buy. It's just not where you skimp. There's places to skimp, and it's like skimping on the tires or the brakes or something like that, or the pieces of the engine, just like it's super critical to what you're doing. And so I don't skimp. That's not where I cut corners. Anyway, next question.
Andrew C. in Rochester says, there's a shot in the movie Limitless called, I think, an infinite zoom. Can you explain how this is done, or is it a tool that can be used without spending a lot of money?
You don't have to spend money. You just have to get the clips that are going to match to what you're doing. And it's actually probably easier now than ever has been. When I had to do one, I did one 20 years ago. That's when they started. The original infinite zoom, of course, was it was a zoom out from the girl in the picnic. Their furniture designers made it.
IKEA?
What?
Was it IKEA?
No. This in the 70s they did it.
Oh, back in the 70s.
Yeah, 70s they did.
Cosmic Zoom was a movie early that did this pull from
that
the
Zoom.
boat.
I'm sorry, I was thinking of something else.
All the way out into the cosmos and then back in, and then
Bob Zemeckis did that for Contact. The opening of the film was from a radio right into the universe, past sound and everything. It's just one continuous shot. Amazing.
Yeah. So what I think is being done there, I was thinking of something different. I was thinking of infinite zoom. When I think of infinite zoom, I think of coming from space. and landing on the ground. For this, that's most likely compositing. So it's not that it's expensive. It's just that you have to get shots with the same camera, focal lengths and everything else. And then this one, I don't even know when he zooms up like that. I don't even know if they're doing that with actual moving cameras. It looks like they're just photographs, the really high resolution that are being zoomed up. You'll notice because I don't see, as they zoom in like this, I don't see any change in that one moved, but it looks like a 2D move. What I don't see if you look at this, they're animating small little bits of things, but otherwise what you're not seeing is any parallax. So parallax is the change of the foreground versus the background. You'll see it as they zoom in, you'll see that they're not changing, the poles aren't changing in relationship to the windows, everything else. And so these are just photographs. So this would not be hard to do.
It's not a walking zoom.
Yeah, it's not a walking zoom. This is photographs. Every once in a while they move something so that you feel like it's real. But it's not. It's just a photograph. It's a bunch of photographs so that's not expensive. You could do that in motion for $50, and so that would be, you just need really high res images to zoom in on, and then you transition before you get too big. Go ahead, Stuart.
Would that be an ideal use for the 12K Blackmagic camera?
Well, it doesn't matter because these are just photos. So you just get a really high resolution. What I'd probably end up using is a
I don't think they were photos
A7R.
because there were people walking in those. There were people walking in
just
those
barely.
things.
They're just animated. I promise you that, or they're a green screen. If you look at it, there's no parallax. So and they moved the taxi. A person moves a little bit. They're just doing just enough to sell the shot. And so it's just an open. Probably didn't have a lot of money to do it. I mean, when I say not a lot of money, I had $10,000 or $20,000 to do it. It wasn't, that to do that with video would be really expensive. To answer the question that I was trying to answer the question you didn't ask, the fun one to do is the infinite zoom from space. And to do that, typically what you do is you take Google Maps is actually pretty useful for that, and Google Earth specifically. And you need to get a shot of the Earth with clouds, which you can get from NASA. And you start that zoom, and when they hit the clouds, you pull it up, and when they hit the clouds, that's your transition point to the Google map. And then you put another couple of layers of clouds that go by as you come out of it, so that you see a couple more things go by, and it creates the motion that you feel like adding other things that are zooming by. And by the way, and then you get a couple resolutions, and basically what you're doing is you're zooming down until you get to the we basically put the next card that is your next resolution into the frame, and you slowly fade it in. You have to match it, just as it reaches full frame, but you don't want to snap. So you have to kind of blend it in so that it goes from, card to card to card to card to card. And then the best thing nowadays is that we used to finish it with a jib, but now you can finish it with a drone. So the first part of this is easy. It's the last 10 feet that, or the last 150 feet that is, and if you, so you can have a lot of fun with it, but it's a much more doable thing than it used to be. It was doable 20 years ago. We did it, but it's now a pretty simple operation to do that. Go ahead, Schy.
Well, I think the live version of what you're talking about is also, wasn't it 1917, the film, and also Birdman? Mm-hmm. You would find transitional points where you would go into a dark moment and then you would continue on the second shot, but it also always kept like it was steady.
Yeah, that's invisible editing. That's not strictly the zoom thing that you're discussing, because that's separate.
Yeah. Next question.
I still remember in college seeing Cosmic Zoom for the first time, and that was just a mind expander. What a moment. National Film Board of Canada, they did such great work. John Preto says, did anybody see the long-anticipated GMC Hummer event yesterday? Any comments?
They really should change the name of that car. That's all I got to say.
So people have been waiting.
It's just a horrible name for a car. And that's every time I can't buy one. I couldn't buy one just because I couldn't talk about it. Anyway,
they're pretty awful cars to drive to. We rented one. We had to go to a snow country, and it was the last car available at Avis. And they've got no room in the cabin. A huge thing between the two front seats. They're really weird.
Go ahead, John.
Last one at Avis. That tells you something.
So they originally announced this back in April, and in the middle of COVID. Then they pushed it off to June, and they had a small unveiling in June. And yesterday was the big unveil because you could do the pre-order. And they ran a 9-minute video. That's it. No host, no audience, no chat, nothing. That's it.
Yeah.
That was the whole event.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, that'd be a perfect example of you open the thing up with a video and then you open it up to Q&A. Let people ask questions and talk to them and answer them. Maybe they did that for the press, but
The video was spectacular. It was very well produced, but there was no engagement at all. Zero.
it's a lost opportunity. You got a lot of people that are interested. Yeah, but the name is, they should have just done something different. Stuart.
It sounds like they did the event in the exact opposite way to what Tesla do their launches, where it's a presentation and then a Q&A section, although obviously you can't do it in person anymore.
Although I will say that the one that they did I thought it was great. I mean, well, I thought the video quality was horrible, but the Tesla, I think it was the battery launch that they did a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago or whatever. It was a couple of weeks ago, I think. I thought was really good. It was them standing on stage, just answering questions and talking about it. And it was a much more informal experience. And I found it much more engaging than most presentations. You know, it was real people talking, real smart people who think about this all the time talking about it is way more engaging than a prepped up, presentation. Go ahead, Bill.
That's the same as the one for the Cybertruck and the Semi. Sorry, Bill. The same sort of format for the Cybertruck and the Semi was very informal Q&A, and then rides for the.
Yeah, my comment was just don't test the shatterproof windows until you've tested them before.
Yeah. Next question.
Moving on to Keenan Campbell of Princeton, Illinois. For a native Mac environment, what are some alternatives to vMix? OBS doesn't seem to have the titling and graphics functions.
There is Wirecast. I use Memo Live. Those are the two big ones on the Mac platform. But yeah, I found that I think I just had too many scars with Wirecast to go back. So I started with Wirecast. So I built my live streaming company on top of Wirecast. So it's not that I've never used Wirecast, but I found there's so many scars and painful memories that I just couldn't go back. Go ahead, John.
So these are all built. This is all built in OBS. Sans this is done in After Effects.
Nice.
But you can do some pretty good stuff in the standard OBS if you know what you're doing. It takes a lot of time. Not as easy as building a Wirecast or Mimo or vMix, but the tools are there.
Yep. Guy.
One more, and you might want to plug your ears, Alex, because you probably have scars from this one too. Livestream Studio. Did you got some areas in the back?
I haven't used it that much. It's because it lives in this world of kind of that software-based hardware or software hardware solution. I know they have just software now. Most people I've talked to that have used it, we've used it for a couple shows. I mean, it was just for whatever reason it was used, and it was fine. It didn't do anything horrible. It wasn't great. It broke a lot.
I got to play with it over the weekend a little bit more, and I was blown away by the simplicity of bringing graphics in, lower thirds and titles, and then also the web control panel where you can grant somebody else remotely the ability to switch and bring in those titles. I was like, what? This is
just
cool.
Be careful. That's the part that broke a lot for us. So there was a dependency on, it wasn't fortunately a very heavy dependency, just meant it was harder for the central operator, but the web interface broke a lot. And then their call-in feature requires you, if you have to reset it for one person, you have to reset it for everybody. So you have to send new links out. And it was not like we survived the show. It was like a 12-hour show, but I was kind of left with, I'm never using this again. So Neil.
Yeah, we have a live stream 550 HD in our podcast studio for recording podcasts and streaming them live. And one thing I found out with live stream is that it can be very picky and very crashy depending on what you're trying to do. But once you have it set up and working, it usually doesn't break. Getting it to that point is meticulous.
Yeah. So anyway, so and again, I found that for what I do, which is a very specific mission with Memo, because usually once I do something bigger than Memo, I'm in hardware, so it's a different solution. So, but I found Memo to be pretty straightforward, which took me a long time. There's some limitations that I'm trying to figure out with it, but it's for the most part, it's been really rock solid. Next question.
Okay, and just a reminder, Alex, I've got to leave in 3 minutes. So Keenan Campbell in Princeton says, how are you doing the audio monitor? I think that it'd be beneficial to Zoom meetings to have some attendees adjust audio levels.
I don't know if anyone wants to talk to it. I mean, so this audio monitor here is it's just a plugin that you can put into something like Audio Hijack, and this is the Waves. I don't remember which one it's called, but it's a Waves plugin that does the metering, and it's just a screen capture of the Waves plugin. And so Audio Hijack has routed that audio into it, and then you get to see what the values are. And that's pretty much it. It's not a very complicated setup. I haven't had time to look at the Zaps, the Zoom apps, but I do feel like a Zoom app that did this would be pretty useful. Like that just you could have it be a participant or even have it just somewhere else that just shows it. I haven't gotten a chance to see how deep Zaps goes yet. Go ahead, Jeff.
Very crude approximation of that. And when you go into your Zoom settings and the audio setting, you do get a 10 bar LED meter, and we're kind of averaging about the seven bars up. So you can tell people that comes included with Zoom. That's free. Go in, check themselves, get their audio level set somewhere there up in the 2/3 area.
That's great. Next question.
Larry Tang in Concord says, is it safe to have an Atem Mini in an enclosed case? There are so many YouTube videos out there that are showing you how you can have it in one case and be ready to be used for an event. I'm concerned about airflow.
I'd be concerned about airflow. I think that its airflow management isn't great. The only switcher that I've ever had that caught fire or smoked, actually generated smoke, was an Atem production studio. The first little 1U that they made before they had all these fins on the back, and it was the first one, and I packed it very at the top of a rack as a backup switcher. It wasn't even the main switcher; it was just a backup switcher. And over comms, you heard this very calm, yeah, we've got smoke in the control room. Smoke in the control room. And then it goes on, it clicks off, and then there's like a long silence. And this was actually at Google. It was a G studio, and we were using one of their little rooms, and then then they come back on. And they go, "We've unplugged the production studio. We no longer have a backup, but everything else is running fine. Thank you." And we were about to do like a really high level event, and it was smoke. Smoke in the studio. So anyway, so I would be always worried about that. But we do that with everything. We rarely go more than a couple U, like 3, 4, 5 U before we put a fan in. So we have fan. We have them with temperatures, and we tell them, we spend a lot of money. Fans are not that expensive, but if you're going to build an enclosure, I would definitely have something that's passing air through it, not just have it in there, especially with an Atem is generating heat. So it's doing a lot for the space that it's in. So next question. Next question is Tim Corbin. He said, Alex, what monitor would you use for sync? You mentioned STI with a headphone. Then what monitor would you use that costs 1/7 of an Alex? When I'm checking sync, I use a wired headset to a laptop. So, I mean, or I use an iPad, with a wired connection. But what I really trust is my headphone jack on my laptop, looking at the feed, not on the local one. And I generally check sync at the farthest end of where it's going so that I can see what it's looking at. But I don't trust anything other than that when I'm looking at sync, because your TV connected to Apple TV is losing a couple frames. Your Bluetooth is losing a couple frames. There's all kind. If you're listening on two separate devices, they're different. So there's a whole bunch of variables that pop up that that I try to avoid by making sure that I do it just wired headphone to a laptop, looking at the laptop screen. It's all integrated together, and I found that to be the most accurate. Anyway, so we're down to our last question, unless someone asks more questions. We have the emergency question that Kev put in earlier, just in case we didn't get enough questions for the day. The emergency question is, unless someone asks something new, what is your personal favorite music score or soundtrack, film and TV only, and why? Anyone have any? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I've got a million, but
I know
one that
that's
comes
hard
to
for me.
mind
Favorite is really
is,
difficult for me.
the scene in Amadeus when he is dictating the Requiem score. So it's a great combination of source music and score music. So he's dictating and singing poorly the lines, and you hear the orchestra in parts in the background. So it kind of also shows you how the music is put together, because you hear individual elements and then you hear it put together, and then it becomes the score for the next scene when they cut to his wife racing back to his bedside.
I have to. I realize I don't think I've seen Amadeus for 25 years. I need to watch that again. That's a great movie. I'm partial to Braveheart. I think it's a great score. But I'm Scottish, so I like the bagpipes. I think that's a pretty great score. I like also Man on Fire. I think is haunting. Man on Fire, and it just got this haunting. What they did really well is they used the music. The music means something at the very end, and they weave it through the entire film. There's this thread that they're pulling into it, that they're constantly stopping for. And if you actually watch how they use it, they're tying you into the end with the score, which is just kind of amazing. And it's a movie I've watched a lot, so I can tell you lots of weird things that they did. That movie is as a masterpiece. Like, whether I don't know if you like it or not, but the Tony Scott did that movie, and I just felt like it's the best movie he's ever made, in my opinion. Go ahead, John, and then Stuart.
So when I was a young kid, I saw Captain Nemo fugue in D minor in the opening. Very haunting.
Stuart?
3 points to make. Firstly, to Tim Corbin in the chat, you cannot mention that movie with such a bad audio mix. And I'll leave it at that. But the two scenes that grabbed my attention is the match cut from a bone tossed in the air to a satellite for 2001. And the second, and I don't know why, but it's something just appeals out of it, is Thor meeting the Game Master in one of the most recent films, where he's like in a tunnel of light and then suddenly he's sitting in an electric chair. It's just weird and I like it.
That's Ragnarok, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
That's it. That's
Kev, what's yours? You didn't tell us,
Mine,
Kev.
yes, I have two, one TV and one film. Film first, 1977, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Mm-hmm.
I think John Williams' soundtrack for that movie, considering what it did and where it went, was remarkable. It went from full-on horror, as the opening sequence when Barry is being kidnapped, when the kitchen's flying around, and then you've got that huge operatic finish at the end. It's just bliss. I listened to it again recently on the 4K, which was wonderful, because I also heard that final deep, low frequency, what I've not heard for 40 years, finally Dolby Atmos with no distortion. Just incredible low bass in the sequence where he's at the railway crossing. Brilliant movie. And TV, very recent one, actually, it's Picard. I thought the music for that, the theme, is just beautiful. Absolutely remarkable. It weaves in the sense of history, time, a life led, and yet it's still at the same time, it's keeping the ethos of the Trek movies, obviously with the character, but also with the music. Right at the end, there's a little motif of the original Alexander Courage, but just the slightest, not too heavy. Very well done. Jeff Russo, I think, wrote that. That's mine.
Stuart?
Kev, just on Picard,
yeah.
What are the odds that it is really just going to be a vehicle for a 7 of 9 spin-off?
Might do after season 3, because I believe Picard or Patrick is actually committed to 3 anyway. They'll see how he's going there. But yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised, especially him and the new character that's coming to the show, Evan.
I do think, when you're talking about John Williams, I think that we would have enjoyed the new Star Wars more, even though he did both scores. There was something magical about the original Star Wars soundtrack that just brought it all together. And I really felt when I was working on it, when I got the new, because all of our tests when we were doing previs was all with the old Star Wars music. And when I heard the new stuff incorporated, some of the folks loved it, but I was like, huh, that doesn't feel like Star Wars anymore. Like it literally just didn't, like the movie. I looked at the movie differently and I desperately wanted a version of Star Wars that didn't have the music, so I could re-add all the Star Wars music back in, because I was like, I have this theory that it would be twice as good just by switching back to the old soundtrack, because I think that there's some, it wasn't that one was better than the other, it was just that something captured that. And I think for so many of us, it was that hearing the horns or, you know, coming in or whatever is just so nostalgic that would pull you back into it, that we didn't have and I think that was one of the problems with the prequels. Go ahead, Schy.
Jon Favreau talks about that challenge, of course, with doing the Mandalorian series, and in the behind the scenes, they focus in on the musician, and he's a multi-talented individual, but he wanted to give honor to that tradition, but he worked really hard at bringing his own style.
It's not his own style. It's not.
I mean, not okay. You're
it's
right.
Rocky. So it's going the distance with Rocky. Like, he worked on the last two Rockies before Mandalorian. There's nothing about that as his own style. So he worked on the two other movies. If go back and watch the you know, like the thing from Rocky, watch the two of them, listen to the two of them next to each other. And I wouldn't say that if he hadn't worked on two Rockies. So he obviously heard it a lot. Now, whether he consciously did it or unconsciously did it, it's so close that I'm surprised there wasn't a lawsuit. Like,
I've heard people say the same thing. I haven't even seen the show, but everybody's remarks on this. It sounds like Rocky.
It doesn't just sound like Rocky. Just play the two head to tail.
No, I hear it.
And you'll hear it, like, because as soon as I heard it, I watched Rocky a lot too. As soon as I heard it, I was like, that sounds really familiar. It took me a little while to kind of my head to glue it to another song, and then I went and listened to it, and I was like, oh, he just ripped it off. I mean, like, Milli Vanilli got into more trouble for not being as close as he was. That's all I got to say. Stuart.
Speaking of things that have been ripped off, Blade Runner, the original, Tron Legacy seemed to change the scores for so many films, what have you. But one that stands out long term, maybe as much as 2001 does, is the score from the original Ghost in the Shell. There were just moments in there that were absolutely perfect. And please do not mention the version with actors.
All right, we're going to move on. We were almost out of questions, and now we're full again, so we're going to keep going. Greg Yotes said, what does anyone think about the Nikon Z5 camera as a fixed studio camera through an Atem Mini via HDMI? What's the price on that? On the Z5? Does anyone know? I don't know. I don't think any of us have it, so I don't know if we have enough practical knowledge to say whether it would be good or not. Can't shade it, so that's that. You know, again, when you take these still cameras, whether they're still camera or whatever, being able to control the color and lighting is kind of a big deal. So that's the only thing I would say is you can play with other things, but man, it's so much easier when you can shade it and affect focus and color from the thing. Right now I don't have that because I have a SDI version. I'm a little out of focus, I think, and I have to get it all fixed together here, because right now I have the Mini, but I have a SDI camera, and that's the problem that I'm having at the moment. Go ahead, Hosmuk.
Yeah, my dream camera is still the Blackmagic. I use the Nikon Z6. And just as you said, it's such a problem to get your settings right, your white balance, the aperture and the color. And it looks the worst compared to the iPhones in the same setup. Right. So, yeah. In fact, I'm just talking to Guy to see if I should rather use the HuddleCam HDMI instead of the Nikon.
Okay, there you go. Yep. Next question is from Jim E. from Louisville. He says, Alex, what is the headset that you are using? In my office, I have my older DPA 4066. That's what I have on right now. At home, I have a Countryman. So you can always tell if it's tan, it's a DPA 4066. And if it's black on the other side, it is a Countryman H6. I actually think that the Countryman sounds more present, like it's clearer than the DPA, but the DPA has a little bit more low end. So it just depends. And because my voice already has a little bit of low end, I can get away with the Countryman. And I find the Countryman just a little, even, I know it sounds odd, but less noticeable or obtrusive because it's slightly smaller pickup. So anyway, but Guy's showing you a close up of that DPA. So.
Yeah, here's the DPA 4066, and kind of see behind. It's got like these sweat drip capsule things, and this is like a $600 mic though. It's super clean.
Yeah, I mean those are the two that I like the most as far as headset mics go, and I recommend headset mics. Now the headset mics that we use in the system as a group start at the Pulson, which is $10. So and it will do 85% of what these mics do for $10. So just. And the pile is going to be available in a week or two. Again, we sold them out by tweeting out and talking to our friends and everything else. But so if there's
mine is currently 7 stops away from delivery.
Yeah.
Finally got them in stock again.
Yeah, so you can get something that dramatically changes the quality of your audio that hooks to your head. Just get the 2-ear one. The 1-ear one is a disaster. The 1-ear pile, we bought them for some shows because we were sold out. The 1-ears are a disaster. Like they're just swinging all over the place. It's too long. So you're anyone with a smaller head, even mine, it's too long for me, and I've got a pretty big head. And so in so many ways, but so you have to kind of play along. You're trying to teach someone how to do it. It's a little bit of a art project, to get it to work well. Neil Goldstein says, do you think Apple will keep its ecosystem on ARM-based Macs closed, similar to the iPhone? Yeah. I think that's absolutely what they're going to do.
It scares me. It really scares me that that's going to happen.
I think that it should scare anybody who's not on that ecosystem. I mean, for the folks that are in the ecosystem, I think that, there's a lot of people that develop a lot of tools for the iMac, for the iOS stuff as well. So, but I think that Apple is, the problem really is for manufacturers is that Apple was like, I always think of it as like with cats, your cat is only nice to you because you're much bigger than it is. And you can pet it. Sometimes it's nice to you because you can pet it, but if the cat was the same ratio that you are to the cat, it would just eat you immediately. And so the Apple, was this little company that had everything all integrated together. And that gave them an advantage and they were able to be efficient. Now they're the biggest game in town and they have the money to do what they're doing now, which is to tie it all together. And the real issue that people have is that they're just going to outperform everybody. Like they are, like if they keep on going at the trajectory they're going, within 5 years, you won't be able to buy a piece of hardware and software solution that is anywhere near what Apple is producing, at the same price, because they've had to externalize these costs to chip manufacturers and all kinds of other stuff. Now they're internalizing all of that, and then they're tying it all together with their software. It's lethal, and it's going to perform faster. It's going to be more effective. It's going to be more seamless. It's going to all those things. So as a consumer, we're going to be great. But if I was a PC manufacturer, that would keep me up every night of how to compete with that, because you can't piecemeal that solution. You can only do what Apple's doing if you're Apple, and so they're being themselves to do that, but it's a lethal combination. Go ahead, Neil.
The thing that scares me the most is what other components of what I'm using is going to break once they force you to have to get everything for your Mac from the Apple Store on your Mac, when I can just clearly right now go to a website, download an app that works on my Mac and have it run with the piece of hardware I bought.
It's again, I think that we have a decade before we have to really worry about that. So, I think that we're going to still see Intel Macs for 3 to 5 years. And then once they're sold, they're still going to be supported for another 3 to 5 years. And so I think that you're talking 6 to 10 years away before we do that. And, those manufacturers have a lot of time to think about how to do it, they're not, Apple's not sneaking up on anybody, my guess is that the first silicon will be little laptops, they're not going to be, it's not going to be giant. I mean, if they do something, the only wild card is they just finished the Mac Pro recently. And so there's a thought that you could already, do it that way, but my guess is laptops, like the base level laptops would be the safest ones. Because I don't think you get a lot of people to buy a Mac Pro to do that, because they would just, everything's going to break at the beginning. So it's easy to get all Apple's products working on it. And again, in a lot of ways, that puts a lot of pressure on programming to support silicon, because if you don't, then all people have is what actually supports the hardware, which is going to be used by a lot of people. And so it puts a lot of pressure on people to figure out how to make it work, And so I think it'll be interesting to see. And I think that if for the companies that already moved to Swift, I think it's a lot easier. The ones that have been holding back on the Swift development, I think they're going to pay a pretty heavy price to make the conversion. Eric Hall said, who made the decision to add sound to space? I have no idea who made the decision to have fire in space. Who made the decision to? I did a reflective ship in space that had to look like something when all it would look like is black.
Steam. Why is there steam in space?
Yeah, because it's a story. It's a story, and so you got to tell the story, and that's that. Anyway, go ahead, Stuart.
The decision to add sound to space came before there was any probes or anything in space. They were already making films set in space, so nobody knew that there was no sound in space.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Mike
and
Henderson.
Besides that, anybody who follows English sci-fi knows that the TARDIS projects its own environmental field, so you can hear within that.
Mike Henderson said, "What is your process for matching cameras? Set the same f-stop ISO, then go to the camera control in the Atem." Yeah, we need to. I'm not going to be able to do this. I promise that in November I will do a camera matching second hour. I'm not going to promise anything before November. It's a hectic time between now and then. But we'll do one. It's a useful thing. You definitely want to get the cameras as close as they can be before you start shading them. But then once you start shading them, you need a good chart, and I'll show you how to do it with the chart that I have, and then we can go from there, and people can talk about it. James Babbitt said, "Alex, have you seen my octopus teacher with filmmaker Craig Foster on Netflix?" I have not. I don't know what it is.
It's pretty magical. It's a one man's life learning about himself. Go ahead.
I saw the trailer. I want to see it. I haven't seen it yet. The trailer looked amazing. He's spending a lot of time with his octopus. And
with himself, but the octopus is the motif.
Right.
So
got it. Okay.
It's self-discovery, self-realization, but it's pretty awesome. Beautiful photography.
I still wonder whether octopus are aliens. They have a lot of DNA. They have a lot more DNA than we have, and they seem really smart. If you want to throw in what films, I'll go back to Biggest Little Farm. That's a documentary about right there in Moore Park. And I will say I love that. I love that film, that documentary. I love that they bought a farm to make they wanted a farm, but they made a movie about the farm. So there was budget in planning and everything from day one to shoot a documentary about building a organic farm, which I just thought was genius. You're not, this person's successful and then we're going to do it, but they got a ton of funding so that they had the money. Basically, instead of spending money on traveling and doing a documentary and doing everything else, they got someone to put money into them actually showing how they did it. And it was just, I thought Biggest Little Farm, if you haven't seen it, you should see it, because it's just a really, really well-made movie. I'm a little bit of
and good story too, as far as
it's a great story.
The message. It
has my kids inspired that we're going to try to build a little farm in the backyard. So
are you going to let groundhogs dig under your fruit trees?
No. Anyway, so but I am going to get a bunch of owls. I got an owl box, owl house for my not an outhouse, but an owl house, and a bat house for my.
Bats are awesome. They keep the mosquitoes down.
Oh yeah, it's fun to watch them too. Like when they come out, watching them over the backyard is a lot of fun. They're zigzagging around. Ken Jones said, "What about a less than $100 over-the-ear headset? What does the panel wear for all-day use? Are all-day and sub $100 mutually exclusive?" I don't. Go ahead, Jeff.
He's looking for over-the-ear. I did have something. It was about $30 or $40. It used a TRRS I'm going to look for the link for that and put it in chat. It's an integrated headset and mic.
Yeah, I haven't found an I don't wear over the ear very much, so I can wear headphones a lot for a long time, but I'm fine with them being in my ear all day. I prefer them in my ear and just all the time. Block everything out. Go ahead, Paul.
I think Plantronics makes a pretty good over-the-ear headset. I think they're about $30. They used one for a while. Haven't used it in a while though.
The one that I'm most fascinated with right now is the AirPods Pro, and the fact that I can just squeeze one ear and it starts giving me the outside noise, and then I squeeze it again and it blocks it off. And I was kind of like, I thought that it's a really fascinating. Now I just want to leave them in all the time. Like when I'm walking around, I want to leave them in because it's just, you just want them in all the time because you just don't want to think about it and then go back and forth. I'm seamless and just move around. Go ahead, Hosmo.
Yeah, for virtual meetings for my staff in the office, I bought the Logitech H570E.
And how much is it?
Oh God, this is in rands.
Is it under $100 or under?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's under $100.
That's
So
great.
this is it, and the sound is pretty good. So it's over the ear, and they find it very useful.
Like a good example is not this one, but I had a bad cable with my audio implements, but on many days I'm wearing that audio implements in my ear for 6 to 8 hours for meetings. You know, it's a pretty common day for me. Tim Corbin said, since we're light on questions, servo lenses, what zoom ranges would you use for different throws? EF mount, B4. I prefer EF or PL. EF on smaller cameras and PL for the larger cameras. I don't use a lot of B4 because I don't use a lot of 2/3 inch sensors. I'm a kind of a bit of a Super 35 bigot. I feel like Super 35 is like minimum size for me. I do use 2/3 inch when the throw is longer than 75 feet. It's just hard to keep focus at a Super 35 sensor size on over 75 feet. You just end up with razor sharp depth of field. Razor short depth, just these 3 inches, so that becomes more challenging. But again, that's kind of the zoom range that we get a lot is 19 to 90. We're using Cabrillo. We tend to use Cabrillo lenses for most things for production, so it's 19 to 90, and then there's like a 70 to 200 or 70 to 300 or something like that, and then we rent the big one. There's 1,000. There's the 1,000 millimeter. I think it's 500 to 1,000 millimeter, something like that, Canon, and they make those by hand. There's like one person that assembles them. I met her at NAB. It's a very small Japanese woman. She builds them all. I said, what happens when she gets sick? And they said, we stop making them until she gets bad. I was like, that's not a very sustainable model. They only make like 30 or 40 a year or something like that. Go ahead, Stuart.
For the B4 things, the wider lenses are very common for E&G guys with the camera on the shoulder, especially when they're going to walk backwards down the street. Try not to trip over. But one thing that a friend of mine reminded me today was that there is a B4 to C CS adapter, which might grab the interest of those people who've picked up the Macos C100 in the last few weeks.
That would be funny. I have taken the Blackmagic Micro and put it on an MF to B4 and put it onto the back of a box lens. It's a pretty funny thing. It looks fine, but there's something hilarious about this huge lens with a little sensor just attached to the back. Anyway, AO Mind said a client just requested a DVD of a production we did. Yes, I know, a DVD. Any authoring software someone can recommend as Encore or DVD Studio Pro are gone. Oh man, I don't. Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't have anything modern. I have a Mac 10 10.9 machine that will run Toast with Jam, and that'll do some DVD stuff. And then I still have a drive that I can drop into a G5 to run DVD Studio Pro. And thankfully, I haven't needed to spin that up in a few years.
I would find a service that did it Like I wouldn't bother with the whole trying to figure out how to do it. If you have one client that wants to do it, I wouldn't even try to figure it out. I would just find somebody who can, some service that you can send away the file and you get back the DVD and you send it to them. It'll cost you $50. It'll save you a bunch of time. It's not worth it. I mean, how often is that going to happen? Unless you're going to have that client over and over and over again. That's crazy. We had one where we were doing stuff for VH1 and what was it? We were doing all this digital and we have to deliver everything in files, but the person reviewing it at VH1 was an executive and you had to give it to him on a cassette, on a VHS cassette. But I had a Pixel member that was working at VH1. And so what I would do is I'd FTP the file and then he would drop it onto a cassette tape and bring it in. And they thought it was amazing that happened so quickly. Like, they were like, how does he send it same day? And I was just like, the internet. Anyway, so it's a fun little thing. All right. Made it through another day, 2 minutes shy of the hour. I have a 9 o'clock, so I'm going to be bumping out here. Stuart, if you can give me back my hosting capacity, I'll close this thing up. And
okay,
anyway, so
I'm going to have to figure out how I do that first.
You just select the ellipsis on me and say that, say make host, I think. There you
ellipsis, that's the 3 dots, right?
Yep.
Okay, and we go make host. There we go, sir.
There we go. Now I'm back. So anyway, I'm going to try